Hello, everyone, and welcome to another webinar during AMEC Measurement Month 2025, everyone's favorite month for a reason. So we are so thankful that you're here. I'm Johna Burke, the CEO and Managing Director of AMEC, and it is a pleasure to have you all here with us. We have an amazing panel, and I anticipate this will be the fastest hour of measurement month. So no pressure, guys. When we look at data, when we look at the challenges that comms and PR pros have right now, a lot of it is around data integrity, and misinformation and disinformation play a significant role in those challenges. And so we have assembled an expert panel of those dealing with and working with on a regular basis misinformation and disinformation. And so for the sake of not giving too much information about how great they are, because we don't want them to feel that added pressure, I am going to ask our individual panelists to just take a minute to introduce themselves and their organizations that we're representing to set the stage before we get started. I'll go in order from my screen view. Rafi, let's go ahead and start with you.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for inviting me. I'm Rafi. My background in communications is almost 10 years at agency side, working for agencies including Omnicom's Ketchum in their corporate and tech teams, and getting to work on amazing, fun, inspirational sometimes global campaigns. And now I've also spent the last just over 10 years in-house, wearing a comms hat, and now I find myself at Cyabra with a VP marketing hat, so as well as the comms, which is my first professional love, you could say, but it's still a key core component of what we do here. But at Cyabra, I now find myself having gone full circle, because we're speaking increasingly to comms professionals. Our mission is to fight disinformation. So we're a platform, we're technology that monitors social media, conversations across social media, in order to be able to uncover the fake accounts, the behaviors of those accounts, and the fake content and the narratives that are being spread across all of the main social media platforms. And we do that for governments around the world. In just the last 12 months, we've worked with 19 democracies just around election monitoring and safeguarding, but increasingly, and I suppose I wear this hat today, working with large brands and their comms teams to understand exactly what's going on out there, and what's the real from the fake, and then how they can guard themselves and what they can do when they might find themselves experiencing brand disinformation. So that's where I find you, and great to be part of this.
Great, thanks so much. Now let's move on to the next reel, and that is Nesin.
Thank you, Johna. Hello, everyone. Really glad to be here. I'm Nesin. I'm the CEO of Identrics. We are an automation through AI company. Our background as a company is in risk and media intelligence and disinformation analysis. We are based in the Black Sea region, which, depending on how you look at it, is very advantageous for disinformation, or very disadvantageous as people who are bombarded with disinformation. So we are on the crossroads of it. As for my background on the academic aspects, I come from PR and communication, having studied it several years ago. So I'm very interested in the collaboration between the public and the private sector, and how the media landscape and the PR professionals are fitting into it. We are working with local governments and also with the private sector in analyzing disinformation narratives and how they're crossing borders. Yeah, looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks so much, Nesin. And last but definitely not least, Massimo.
Hi, Johna. Hi, Ho. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I am Massimo. I am from the PR and comms industry. I'm wearing two hats today. One is the hat of Omnicom PR Group Italy. I am the CEO of the company, but my second hat is the one of ICCO, the International Communication Consultancy Organization, which is the voice of public relations consultancies around the world, in the role of the Global Vice President. I accepted this invitation because, as Johna knows, ICCO has been working hard in the last few years to help fight and prevent misinfo, disinfo. A quick recap: in 2021, we supported pro bono the European Medicines Agency around the infodemic on the COVID pandemic. In 2022, we created the first white book on modern communication challenges for professionals, and misinfo was a big topic on that. And in 2023, we launched the pledge, the Media Education Information Pledge, which is basically an alliance that involves several organizations: Council of Europe, the Trust Project, ICCO, the European Association of Communication Directors, Global Women in PR, and UPRERA, in the search for sharing tools, resources that can allow our people, our professionals, and finally the wider public to develop a critical, let's say, knowledge of the information society ecosystem, and giving them the tools to have the right reading of the media they consume. So happy to be here.
Wonderful to have you here. And with his ICCO hat on, ICCO is a very important industry partner for AMEC. So it is a pleasure anytime we get to collaborate.
Our pleasure.
I want to go back to you really quick, Massimo, because you talk about that research that you've done, and obviously that is near and dear to all of our hearts. What were some of the most significant findings that you all were able to uncover in that research, and how has that led you for some of the next steps in helping prepare teams to navigate, that is so complex and complicated for the brands?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we identified 5 blocks in the uphill challenge that we all have on misinfo, disinfo. The first one is media literacy. We have the chance here to rely on the understanding of what is paid media versus earned media, of what reliable and trusted information sources mean, which is a big component of our work, and then labeling, which is something that, for example, the Trust Project does very well, making our people first, but then everybody understand the difference between fact and opinion, if this specific content or article has been written by a specialist or not, and so forth. The second one is around transparency of social platforms, which includes the chance to have open sources in order to check potentially bias in the algorithms, or what kind of moderation policies they do use on specific topics. The third one, which is very important to us, is the international cooperation around what I said before, as we are doing with the pledge, around sharing the best cases, the tools we have, but also the quality standards key stakeholders of the information society offer each other. And by that, I mean, if we look at PR today, PR is in the middle of a circle where we have institutions, we have the general public, we have brands, we have fact-checking entities, we have journalists, and so forth. And we have the chance to connect the resources coming from those parties and share them for the benefit of our professional first, and then the wider public. There is a fourth point, which is around having the chance to support and share trusted sources. And this moves from local independent media to fact-checking entities. And finally, which is a big topic for today's discussion, is around sharing what AI can offer us to prevent and fight misinfo. There are several initiatives on the ground. I want to mention, for example, the Content Authenticity Initiative, which is a great one. And basically, the purpose of these initiatives is to create some labeling for, let's say, any social object that can allow us to see if that object has been manipulated, is original, has been used and reused for the development of a specific narrative. And, you know, these 5 components, I think, are a good start for conversations and for start sharing what we can do in practice to help prevent misinfo, disinfo. Thank you, Johna.
No, thank you so much. I think that's such a great, you know, framework for people to work through on how this can affect their brand. And, you know, I want to go to you, Rafi, because I think when we look at those pillars, especially, it's interesting to see what we see in comms, see a lot of the momentum, see a lot of the amplification. And there is this challenge for brands of how involved they will or will not be around social issues. So when people, you know, put themselves out there, it's important for all of their stakeholders, for some of their stakeholders. How can they kind of inoculate themselves from disinformation attacks by being less visible or by how they frame some of their positions? What are some of your recommendations of how brands can engage in the wider societal issues while still mitigating some of that liability that their brands might be having an avoidance issue around?
Yeah, well, I hope all PR professionals are able to read the findings and the report that Massimo mentioned, because I think there's a lot of learnings from that. But from the conversations that we're having generally, there also seems to be a bit of a disconnect from you know, the best practice, the way to think about it, the frameworks, the guidance, and then on a day-to-day basis, how can we as individuals guide our brands? How can, if we're agencies, how can we guide, you know, the clients that we work for on a very kind of actionable way? And one of the things that we found over many high-profile examples over the last year and a half is one of those recommendations, and this was confirmed by one conversation with an agency just last week, is that their recommendation is that brands generally stay quieter, especially around maybe more controversial or emotive topics of societal issues, whatever that would be, around climate, around anything that might be discussed. And I think brands and communications professionals are keeping an eye on that and guiding that. But if that's the advice, then there's definitely a disconnect, because guiding and advising a brand to just kind of stay quiet, maybe it's the elections, maybe it will pass, maybe, unfortunately, we're seeing the use of fake accounts amplifying specific narratives, being able to jump on brands, and we've all seen the kind of go woke, go broke examples of brands. And so it's a natural reaction for communications professionals to say, you know what, let's just not be involved in those topics, let's not be vocal or active on those topics. But unfortunately, we're seeing many, and that, you know, many brands take that opinion and take that advice and kind of stay quiet and think they are, as you mentioned, Johna, inoculating themselves. Unfortunately, we're seeing many examples of things that either brands are doing, or in fact, if they're quiet, there is a position that is being projected on them, even if they're not doing anything at all. Or in fact, it might be something completely unrelated to anything related to the brand. You know, if there is an election in a far off place in the world and there's a bot network that's been created to amplify, and this is something we've seen multiple times this year, a bot network that's been created around the Indian general election, and as part of their campaign of a bot network, they are jumping on hashtags that might be trending for an hour or two, or as a way to kind of evade the algorithms of the social media platforms. And so if you're a well-known brand and you might be trending for an hour or two, there might be a new product, there might be something, it's likely to be more negative. And if you find yourself that there's a bot network who are jumping on that and are using that, all of a sudden that negative hashtag, through no activity, through no planning of what the brand could have done previously, are suddenly finding themselves trending in many more markets, being discussed. Journalists are contacting them because they're seeing what's online, but the brand themselves can't really piece together, and this is the disconnect piece, piece together of what's happening on the online conversation, and then okay, well, we stayed quiet about all of these various topics. And that isn't even a kind of theoretical piece. We're seeing that more and more. We also, I spoke to a brand in the oil and gas sector last week, and they are very quiet about most of these issues. But yet someone took, in fact, it was on a webinar podcast just like this, and they took a clip from someone unrelated to the brand who had specific opinions about societal issues that brands are now avoiding. And then that clip was taken, repackaged, and through fake accounts, amplified through using a fake narrative, a false narrative, to say, oh, look, this is the head of DEI for this brand. Now, the brand could have been quiet as a mouse, but that's being projected on them. And so this is something we're seeing more and more. So it means the only conclusion we can draw from that is, unfortunately, staying quiet on various topics isn't an inoculation on that. And I think as PR professionals, it's important and incumbent on us to guide the companies through that and let them know that, yep, it might lower some of the risk, but it certainly doesn't take it away. But then how can we plan for potential activities that I mentioned if they do come up?
So both mildly and wildly horrifying, depending upon which end of that response you are. But I think there is this definite shift for brands, and they're looking at a lot of the societal issues, but also the economic issues of, where they need to create efficiency and value within their own brand and what they're doing, what their widget is, what they're making or what they're doing and servicing, and threading that needle really with their stakeholders about, is this, so important? Back very shortly after the Roe v. Wade decision came in the US, I was at an event and heard someone from Microsoft speaking, and he framed it. It was so interesting because he said, we aren't going to talk about abortion. No one is waiting for what they're going to do, based on Microsoft about what our opinion is. The reason our opinion will come forward is because we do care about our employees, right? That is relevant and very important to our core business, is our employees and what that might mean to them. So I want to go to you, Nesin, along those lines, what is, when faced with those societal issues, and I know that comms people are very passionate, but they're representing the brand in this case. So what is the role of the comms and PR professional when they're faced with some of these challenges about how they thread that needle between personal passion, beliefs, and purpose, and that which is consistent and conducive with the brand and what they're trying to accomplish there?
One interesting aspect that we're seeing when working mainly with government organizations is that this latest technological boom brings into light the need for much larger fronts of collaboration between the government organizations and the private sector. And of course, one thing that we all agree on is, yes, this is an issue. A thing that we cannot quite agree on how are the exact mechanics to tackle it. And every time we are going through these motions, through these conversations, we are trying to bring in PR and communication specialists into the fold, because I believe that this is the aspect that is missing. We are hearing about media literacy. It's very important to continue hearing about it. I know that some people are seeing it more as a pipe dream, but I think this is the only sustainable framework that can provide taking information initiative. And taking information initiative is really the end game here. And the only way to get there is to work with the people who are being paid to communicate, to work with PR specialists, work with marketing specialists. These are the people who know how to sell ideas. And media literacy, before becoming an asset, before becoming a skill, it is an idea. Societal resilience, before being instilled among a large part of the populations, it is an idea. So we very much need those professionals, and connecting their professional side with their emotional side is very easy, especially if those professionals are in countries that are so clearly to see that are under influence from foreign information doctrines. So on the bright side, this is the good news for PR and communication professionals. I think now they are more needed than ever, and they need to take the challenge on and to become proactive in their communication. Because if there's one thing we need is to make the other side compete with the truth, whether our side to compete with mis and disinformation. Because at the moment you start mis and disinformation competition, a lot of people, and this ties back into staying quiet. We see a lot of brands, but we also see a lot of governments staying quiet because they're afraid of acknowledging it, because they think they acknowledge it in some way, they would validate it in this way. And I can see the logic behind it. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, what else feeds into it, I think, is a way of working that's left over from legacy media. Yeah, we've been talking about the speed of new media for the last years, but I'm not quite sure that this has instilled into the ways of working of communication professionals. So we're still seeing the mindsets of, okay, let's just let it blow over. This worked for radio, this worked for television, this worked for print. Obviously, this is not working for social networks that became social media, and the journalists that have to compete with algorithms. And if we don't want to be on the back pedal of it and compete with it, we need to stay ahead of it, which is filling the vacuum, the information space, with the narrative that we want to control, rather than try to get ahead of attacks and misinformation campaigns.
That's great. And I think I want to stick with you for this next question, Nesin, because I think there is this, this challenge, right? I love that they're competing. It is a competition, right? It is a competition for who can get their message out and also have that recognized by the algorithms, right? I mean, because search is a huge part of all of this crisis and all of these elements. And as people are talking about, leaving platforms, which platforms to stay on, those platforms are still found in search. So if you aren't there contributing and at least helping to monitor and navigate that conversation, it's almost impossible to have your advocates be there to support and help you if you let that network erode, which, I mean, that in itself could be a whole other hour that we could talk about. But I think I want to stick with you, Nesin, and I do want to get each of your opinions on this, because I'm a simple girl from Virginia, so I continue to hear a lot of these conversations. Are we overemphasizing the misinformation and disinformation? Would we be better served by just calling lies lies? Because now you get this debate where someone's like, well, no, it's not misinformation, it's disinformation. It's like, isn't the root of it all still a lie or something that isn't true? So do you think that comms and PR pros would be better served by leaving misinformation and disinformation tags behind and calling lies lies? So no matter their stakeholder, everybody understands what a lie is. It doesn't need to be categorized into something to be able to give them that sense of like, this creates a challenge. I should flag this. I need to fact check this. I need to do my own research. Do you think that simple step could help in this battle and in this competition, as you called it?
Yeah. I recognize the pressure, especially towards communication people, to use current terminology and to use current lingo. That's one. Two, I also recognize the necessity of it. Lies is a very strong word. It's a very finite word. It's a very one-sided word. And the moment anyone, communication professionals, use it, you immediately couple yourself into a two-sided coin, on the other side being facts or truth. And this narrows down your next movements in the communication campaign. And if there's one thing that communication people don't want to, is to feel in the corner. Communication campaigns work on emotion, work on humor, work on subverting expectations, etc. All very human aspects of the communication. And on the one hand, this is important to have place to maneuver. And on the other hand, this really plays into the strength of humans as weavers of communication. And this is very important at the moment. And I think that all PR professionals can agree here that we need that bastion, be it last one or the next to last one, as we are being surrounded by more and more synthetic content generated by AI, news being pushed by algorithms, and automation knocking on the door of very creative fields, which is a bit different than what we were expecting a couple of years ago when we were talking about automation and AI. And I think it's a very necessary hill to defend, not to die on, because I'm intrinsically optimistic. But I think that PR and comm professionals do have a good case, to have most of the people on their side when it comes to being in control in the creation of these narratives, and not falling into the binary truth lies thing. And I do understand the urge for it. I hear it often when talking about when talking with government communication experts, for example. It is always tempting to produce your own propaganda, right? It's never mis or disinformation. It is always propaganda when your own government produces it. And there are always very loud vocal voices in these rooms that are saying that, and I agree with them, that using your own propaganda in the same way is stooping to a level and playing into the other side's hand, because what it does, it's going to put more friction on those pain points, on those friction points that are already being exploited. So I think that's one page we can take from intergovernment communication for the brand level, and not use such loaded terms. Yes, lies become a loaded term in later years. We have to accept it. But I think that communication professionals have far wider instruments on their side to communicate the different things they want to say. That being said, again, lies is a strong word. So if a brand is sure that they're not opening themselves to further attack, I can see it as being a bold part of some edu communication campaign.
No, thank you so much. I want to go over to you, Massimo. I mean, I think Nesin's experience in working with governments, it's great. I think, again, we could have another whole hour on the difference between disinformation and propaganda. So stay tuned for this series that we will be coming back and collaborating again. But right. the reality that we face is that the misinformation effect is a cognitive psychological phenomenon that occurs now. And that's what we're battling against, where it actually distorts a person's memory of an event, which is amazing. And so we see all of these situations now where people are doing searches and they're like, I'm being told this isn't real now. And, you know, it's so interesting. What do you think the PR person's role is in that, going back to that original question of when they're defending and being proactive for a brand, how should they be navigating misinformation and disinformation and the power of a lie, right? Why is it that we don't use that word as opposed to then incorporating misinformation and disinformation and having to go through those explanations of the differences of the two?
Thanks, Johna. Well, first of all, in some cases, a lie is a lie, and you have to say this is a lie. That's it. But there are also other cases where you should be ready to, I'm going back to media literacy, to use labeling. You have a fact, you have your opinion, I have my opinion, and so we are showing different opinions about a fact. On this basis, it's possible to create a dialogue, to create constructive ideas and exchange. Otherwise, the result will be that we will be trapped into our own interest bubbles. And I'm going back to the first point. If we are not able to understand the bias of the algorithms that are showing us only things that we are looking for, we will be trapped in this game. Understanding bias of the algorithm and also the moderation policies of the conversation you find in social media, these should be guiding our understanding of where we are sharing and having a conversation. Okay, and then let me add one point. We are now facing an information society when it goes to information that is basically divided into two, let's say, big chunks. And that's because of paywalls. You have people with a specific culture that are used to pay for having access to the opinion of a specific journalist who is an expert, et cetera, and having multiple, let's say, views on a specific topic, and others that simply they feed on social, and maybe they have an echo of something that has been reported and then manipulated and then shared and then changed. And so what we need to do is to try to find, I don't have an answer yet, but a way to make these two, let's say, chunks interact and have a contact. When we go then to brands, my advice is that we should prepare them and prepare us, not if misinfo eats our assets, our people, but when, because this will happen for sure. And so prep will be very important, having idea of how disinfo spreads, how can I play the game and stop it? How can I go back to my people and reassure them about a specific fact that has been reported? I mean, this is part of a design of preparedness. We should be, in my view, a priority now for all the organizations that want to mitigate risks and enhance the opportunities to have frank conversations with their audiences.
That planning and preparedness piece is so critical. It's where a lot of the work is done, and that work that you hope you'll never have to apply, but really, really important to do. Rafi, same question to you.
Well, Johna, if only we could safely call a lie, but in 2024, I think that's really hard. I mean, just the example that I mentioned before about a recontextualized clip from a podcast that wasn't edited, there was no Gen AI there, and then it was relabeled as being the head of DEI at a certain company, and then that blew up, and the company had a brand reputation image. Is the podcast real? Absolutely. Has it been edited? Nope. Is this a real person? Yes. Is that their opinion? Yes. So they don't work for that company, and that's the lie bit. But what we're seeing more from the disinformation sphere is a tactic called deceptive imagery persuasion, which is where you can take real content, not even necessarily edited, and then you're recontextualizing it with a new narrative, but it's then being amplified by fake accounts. So we see this all the time, for example, in Ukraine, right, where there's imagery of other war zones around the world. People aren't necessarily military experts, and depending on what the narrative they're trying to spread, they've taken imagery maybe from Syria, and then which is true, that's not a lie, the imagery there, and then they're adding the false narrative that's then amplified by fake accounts. And because of the emotive nature of the imagery that we might be seeing, it's what do we call that then? Is that a lie? Is that not a lie? So it's challenging. I would say in terms of the part of the question that you asked about the role of PR professionals, I think PR professionals have a great set of skills that allows them to address the challenges that we have, whether it's as a society or on behalf of their brands. But I don't think that PR professionals are a link in the chain of fighting disinformation. And if they were weak, then it all falls apart. I think PR professionals are just one of many buckets that's catching water in a very, very leaky roof. And so, yeah, we might be really good at catching that water and dealing with that specific container of water, but we still have a leaky roof as a society. And how we solve that is a whole other question, and that's, I think, the analogy that I would think about.
We're going to need a bigger bucket.
many buckets.
So, you mentioned something earlier about these bot swarms, when the bots pick up on a hashtag. I mean, that's mildly, if not wildly, horrifying, right? So what are some of the first steps that someone needs to do, that a PR and comms pro needs to do specifically when they find themselves in the middle of that? And I want to start with you, Rafi, and then I'll go over to you, Massimo.
Sure. So people might get a sense that I'm a big fan of analogies, so I'm going to go through another one, having explained the leaky roof. How can a doctor deal with a patient or operate on a patient if they don't know where the problem is, if they don't know where the disease is? And I think that's what communications professionals are being asked, whether it's the planning stage, whether it's the middle of an issue, they're being asked to deal with something of which they might not even be aware of. I think the sentence that comes up the most in our conversations at Cyabra with communications professionals is the challenge of they don't know what they don't even know. So let's even presume they know that there's a bot swarm. Let's even presume they're understanding the narrative. Really understanding, and there are the tools. There's companies like Cyabra, there are other companies as well, other tools that have been referred to as well that are open sourced and utilizing AI. There are more and more tools out there in this kind of new category of disinformation security, which is fantastic, and people can use it. But you have to have a better idea and a much clearer understanding of where is this coming from. And that's not just understanding whether it's a bot or what the content is. Part of it is which are the actors involved, on what kind of platforms, what's the spread? Because, by the way, maybe there are a network of bots, but actually they're not so successful, in which case the recommendation from the communications professional is we're going to continue monitoring it. But for now, let's not take any extreme action, because any action might actually exacerbate it. We've worked with companies where there have been under attack from a bot network of a specific negative campaign. And one of their tactics was that they get their customer success team on social media to respond to every single one, which includes bots. And so as the company responds to these accounts, they're in fact adding fuel to the fire of the social media algorithms. And then we can come along and say, well, actually 30-something percent of the accounts that you're engaging with are in fact fake. So A, save yourself time, but B, stop adding fuel to that fire. And so you really have to understand where the direction of conversation is, what the kind of content, and crucially as well, what on real people, on the real community, on the you and I. There's a whole bunch of questions that communications professionals need to understand before they can even begin to feel confident enough to give recommendations, or as they're tracking an issue of whether to monitor, ignore, whether to escalate. And those are really, really important questions. And I think communication professionals are really in a really, really tough position to have to do that. But yeah, more of the diagnosis, more of the CT scan is needed.
Great, thank you so much. Massimo, obviously you're dealing with a lot of brands and mapping this, and also looking at the work that you all have done through ICCO. Are you seeing progress from where we've come, or are you seeing that these bot swarms are still just an absolute menace and paralyzing some organizations and comms teams?
Well, in some cases, yes, of course, but I think planning is crucial, as we said. I agree with Rafi, with his view on also being prepared on a technology standpoint in order to map out what is being said about the company. If you can say 90% of the conversations being generated by bots, this is a nice message to send out. but also be very ready to reply and to debunk, which means having a team working in some cases 24/7, be ready to then move vis-a-vis earned media institutions via the own channels of the brands, and why not also via paid platforms, depending on the case. So to summarize, I think is possible to be prepared for that. We need to have a technology solution who can allow us to better understand who is spreading disinformation on our organization, where, and then be ready to reply. But to do this, we need to have a team that is prepared and to have a culture of, again, of collaboration with a broader information society ecosystem in order then to fight really back on the attacks we get.
No, so powerful. And I think, Nesin, I want to come over to you because back in the day, the easy way to identify something was if you came across a particular troll, if you will, you could easily put their picture into the Google search and see that, oh, what a surprise. That same image is associated with 3,000 other accounts. So maybe not the troll you're looking for. But what are some of those resources now? I mean, what's that tech piece? Or is it, so proprietary that it can only be done by, the AI and the large language models that you all produce? How can the average person identify quickly and at scale which accounts are bots so that they can start to educate their teams on who to engage with and who not to engage with as well?
Yeah. Maybe one additional thing to add to what was already said. I mentioned that we are very interested in safeguarding the media landscape. Search and paywalls were mentioned. If we do have the time, I'd like to circle back on that. But one additional way that we are using to flag organized attacks, be it manually organized or in recent years automatically organized, is by tracking the social echo of news articles and news pieces on social media. Oftentimes there we see spikes when something is organized to generate artificial engagement. So this is something that we are using to also help brands, but to also help media flag when their narratives are being hijacked. And I think this is a asymmetrical way to identify bots, and I also think that there's an opportunity here if you are a communication PR professional taking care of a brand of a company, and if you do get attacked by coordinated efforts using all of this that was said by Rafi and Massimo. If you do live to tell about it, do what you do best. Turn it into a product. Turn it into an information campaign. I would love to see. I'm not sure whether this is a novel idea, whether somebody has done it. You can use it for free. I would love to see a dissection or vivisection, if you're doing it live, of how a brand, how a company, how a person is handling being harassed by organized attacks. I think this would really drive home the idea of how these things, AI is standing behind them, how automation is standing behind them. And when I say drive home, by home I mean the people who are actually being targeted, the people at large, which are not in specific industries that are technological industries or communication industries. We need to get the word out there to the people that are outside of our comfort zone, so that they are aware of the possibilities. And I think a case study like this can be turned into a beautiful communication campaign. That was my pitch.
Yeah, it's getting those organizations to actually pull back the curtain and say, this is what worked or this is what didn't work, right? Because we learn so much from those mistakes, and sometimes there is this part where people don't want to be forthcoming with, those failures. So it's a challenge. So to that, I guess, and I'll start with you, Nesin. That would be a great case study. Are there any people that you're watching, and you can name names or not, of who's doing this really well or really bad? So where can people go to see some of those examples and to kind of do some of the learnings on their own if there isn't this formal case study out there?
Yeah. There are stories that you can get insight from, turn into your own case studies. Maybe a recent-ish one that made an impression on me, which entangled a couple of actors, is FEMA, Musk, and X as a platform. I think that's an interesting example, because it's an example of successful attack, let's call it, on the FEMA relief efforts. Then we saw a good rebuttal on FEMA's end, I think. So this can be studied. It was effective as far as I saw, and having X there, I think really helps us pull the picture a bit and see how the game has progressed from individual accounts, fake accounts, bots, etc. Those are important, of course, but it's progressed to the level where we have whole platforms being used as soapboxes to propagate one partisan ideas. And it's interesting to follow that breakage into the Threads platform, into the Blue Sky platform, to muse about open protocols, the future of internet, whether we'll be searching it or whether we'll be asking it. Again, tying back into the paywalls, because the media is forced to come up with, well, it's not a new way, but it's a last resort to keep some of the revenue streams that they have. So this one is an interesting example. And as for keeping up with new developments, we do have examples of large media houses breaking down. We do have journalistic stars that you can find on Substack and you can find on podcast. And in fact, one thing that last elections in the States showed was that legacy media is largely dead and buried. We saw the impact that podcasts had. We saw the impact that the social media had. So again, this for me ties back into different opportunities to study and think about how the information landscape looks to evolve, and whether we are okay with it. And if we are not okay with it, what are the ways and communication channels that we can engage through with government and local government into trying to influence it in some way that we see fit.
Great, thanks so much. Massimo, I want to jump to you really quick. And, I think the postmortem on the US election will be done to a degree that none of us are asking for, if the pre-election is any indication. So how do you see a relevance or a correlation between what happens specifically with politics and what happens with brands through the misinformation and disinformation? Or do you see that as a separate animal of its own?
Well, I think it's part of the same, let's say, of the same battle. We have commercial battles, we have political battles, and then we have wars among humans. I think in all the three areas, misinfo, disinfo can play an important role. can be used, can help parties to get more people in favor on a specific brands or parties or state. And so I think we are talking about the same dynamics that then goes into different spheres. We talking about misinfo, disinfo, and democracy, we face now a risk which is plain to see, because misinfo, disinfo can polarize society. And when society gets polarized, also democratic institutions can be weakened. And this implies that in many countries, the social peace can be compromised. And so there is a lot to do for governments, but also for brands that now are called to, let's say, act vis-a-vis societal issues in a more polarized context. So,
yeah, really, really powerful. Are you seeing the same thing, Rafi? Do you see that there is a correlation between that, or how are brands able to navigate independent of some of the impact that we see for governments and democracy?
So the parallels might not stretch from one to the other in terms of the actors behind it, not exclusively, but the actors behind disinformation campaigns might be different, although the motivations, I suppose, have stayed the same, and have been the case for hundreds, thousands of years of money, power, influence, right? That's the motivation behind it. And so the actors might be different. What we have seen over the last election cycle, over the last 12 months, really, is the way that tactics and these techniques that maybe in previous years we would have seen only regarding or during the times of elections, or only around the kind of public sector government type activities or use cases that governments would have been concerned about, but they are now being applied against brands. And one of the main drivers behind that is the adoption of AI tools, and how that has made the barrier so much lower for malicious actors, regardless of the motivation, but the ability to use AI to create much more effective disinformation campaigns. And because of that, the opportunities are increasing. And so we're seeing brands experience that. Sometimes, like I mentioned, around Indian bot network, and their kind of a brand is bearing the brunt, but sometimes it's really nothing to do with that. And so as we exit 2024, if the conclusion is that we should expect to see less of this kind of activity affecting brands, that's definitely not the case, because it's just been made much, much easier. If English isn't your first language, then maybe the kind of content you created around your fake accounts was limited or easier to spot. But also, when I mean the adoption of AI, I'm not just talking about content. I think more people are expecting deepfakes to occur during the election. Everyone likes to give election cycles a name, right? Is this going to be the deepfake election? And it wasn't. It was the election. Sorry, it was the podcast election. But that shouldn't minimize people's fears, because AI is being used not just for the content, of which deepfake is one. By the way, it's also text, but AI is also being applied to the creation of fake accounts, making them more authentic and giving them much more of a personality, automating the distribution and amplification of narratives, the speed at which you can turn fake accounts around and respond to activities on the ground, and as well as obviously content. And the way that AI is being used for content. So the way that AI is being used as a tool by malicious actors is powering an increasing number of attacks or instances or fake accounts that are aimed at brands, which is scary, but not going to go away after the election's finished.
Bad actors, why we all can't have nice things, this is the answer. So, all right, we've got 5 minutes. Let's do the lightning round. I would like each of you to share kind of how you keep up. What are your sources for how you keep up to date on, the progression of misinformation and disinformation? And also, what is your 1 or 2 tips of what PR pros can do today as they end this webinar to mitigate the risk of their organization around misinformation and disinformation? Massimo, I'd like to start with you, please.
Thanks, Johna. I think my sources are, well, I like the Trust Project. It's an American NGO. They certify quality journalism. Having the chance to get media consumption from a certified TTP media is nice. Second one is the list of fact-checking organizations across Europe. I'm based in Italy, so I'm referring to the European Fact-Checking Network or the European Digital Media Observatory. I think every month and every week there's a chance to get news and views around hot topics and how narratives develop. And then personally, I like to get feeds from the content authenticity initiatives, the one I was mentioning at the beginning of this webinar. I think there is a food for thought, very good insights, and a solid and concrete project where we can give our own contribution as organizations and brands.
And what should PR pros and comms pros do today to mitigate their risk when it comes to misinformation and disinformation?
I think they should look at what, for example, the national associations are doing in respective markets, national PR and comms. Look at ICCO Media Education Information Pledge, and then be ready, in my view, to go through training on how they can prepare their organization to manage misinfo, disinfo attacks. This is the basics, and in most of cases is already a good start.
Perfect. Thanks, Massimo. Nesin, over to you. Sources of how you keep up to date, and one tip that they can go do today.
I think I already gave away a bit of my sources, but what I can add as specific as URLs go, and on the more technological sides to stay up to date on technological advancements for mis and disinfo. I'm a big fan of archive.org. There you can find the latest papers from all around the world for many interesting projects that people are working on. As for tips for including PR and communication professionals, but to anyone really, and I will reiterate myself here, but I think this bears repeating, it is always better and easier to act than to react. We are really rallying behind information initiative, be it public, be it private, be it personal, be it at scale. It is always better and more effective to surround oneself and one's brands with the narratives that we can control rather than to react to them. And as a second one, it's very important to keep in check how local governments are thinking, looking into AI. So my advice here would be, as a source, maybe entangling the two questions, do be on the lookout for government sources and do have an opinion of what the narratives are there. This is an opportunity to steal a book from the Americans and to really drive the idea that if this AI thing is going to be as encompassing as we all think that it's going to be, we have to treat it as building a railroad and not as putting out a forest fire. So we need guardrails, we need understanding, we need opinions to start on all of those things. And I think it's a great moment to start engaging with local government.
Great. Thank you, Nesin. Rafi, over to you.
Well, I think for anyone who's already on this forum, then they already have a head start because they're thinking about it and they've committed time for that. So well done, everyone. I think many sources and many ideas have been mentioned already. I think there's loads of really great research being conducted by kind of academia and NGOs. Some of the best sources I find actually are people or organizations that may have come from the government space. And so they're thinking about it as the government thinks about it. There's an organization called Disarm that I have read their information before, and they are trying to map out all of the different techniques, and they have a kind of red flag and red and blue team type of techniques. You know, here are the things that could happen, and then if you see that happening, here's how to respond. So I wanted to give that because it's really practical and actionable in terms of thinking about the TTPs, the techniques and tactics. And then there's individuals that come from the government space that talk about the mechanics of these kinds of campaigns. People like Ryan Macbeth, who I would give a shout out, and I follow his videos on YouTube. Of course, Cyabra, we publish information almost on a weekly basis of examples of this kind of stuff happening and putting data towards it. In terms of, feel free to check that out. In terms of what comms professionals could be doing to be better armed around this kind of thing, I suppose I would advise reframing the way that they think about this challenge. If you think it's something happens during elections, think again. If you think that this is only an issue if the brand that you work for has decided to take a very public position around a societal or economic or issue, then think again. And try and look at, I think the companies that are doing this best, the comms professionals that are doing this best, are thinking about the wider issues that could be affecting and surrounding the business that you work in. Plus, the last thing for me would be to look at other companies that might have been impacted and what has happened to them, and then try and learn those lessons before it happens to you. So for example, you might not work in pharmaceuticals, but looking at Eli Lilly, who over a year ago, an impersonation account was created of the brand of Eli Lilly, who was active for a while, and then one day this fake account posted that their products are going to be half price, and within minutes their share price had gone down by billions. Right? You might not be on this call working for Eli Lilly, you might not even work in pharmaceuticals, but looking at that example and then thinking, wait a minute, what are the barriers of that actually happening to my brand? Or in fact, do you have the tools and listening to even know whether that's actually currently happening to your brand? And trying to think of the challenges from that point of view, because if you are seeing it happening out there, if you're seeing these kind of tactics, because it's so easy, it really could happen to you. So in terms of that kind of scenario planning or reframing the way that you are thinking about it and talking about it, of looking at the examples across other industries and other companies as well. I hope that's been helpful. I hope everything I said hasn't been too negative or scary. There are solutions out there. There are ways, and we see agencies and brands doing great jobs. And we're at the forefront of this as comms professionals, if you allow me to put that PR hat back on. And there is an opportunity for people to step up and really guide their brands through the good times and the bad times. And so look forward to seeing more of that.
Great. Thank you all so much. As promised, we could go on for 6 more hours and still be mesmerized by the discussion. So for the sake of time, though, I just now saw that there are questions. I am going to see if maybe our esteemed panel will offer some of those responses that we can post in a blog and then share with everyone, so we can get some of those responses, because I do know that everyone's trying to go into a different place now. So special thanks again to our panelists, to Massimo, to Nesin, and to Rafi for taking the time today. For all of you for joining us live. For those of you who are listening to this on demand, we thank you for the time and welcome any discussion around this. I think as a community, AMEC is very blessed with a lot of really smart thinkers and a lot of great partners so that we can navigate this. And if we can't solve it, then it's a problem that perhaps can't be solved, which I don't believe in. So through measurement and evaluation of everything, we can dissect that and make things better and really give those breadcrumbs and lessons to the whole community. So thank you all for joining us. Enjoy the rest of AMEC Measurement Month, and we will see you next, hopefully at another webinar, but definitely in Vienna, June 10th through the 12th for the AMEC Global Summit. Thank you again to our panelists for joining us. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.